This is lesson number 4 from Metal Tech. We are working out of chapter 12 of the book from pages 179 through 186. Sheet metal are metal sheets that are less than 1/4 of an inch or 6.35 millimeters thick. So this pallet over here on the top right, this is a pallet of a bunch of sheet metal. So what they've got here is a bunch of pieces of sheet metal stacked in on in on in. The main part about this is that you need to understand that metal sheets are less than 1/4 of an inch thick. That's the main component. That is the main part of the sheet metal definition. When we're making projects, we're going to be making them, we're going to make a pattern first, which is a full-size drawing of the surface of an object stretched out on a single plane. So if you've got your textbook, you can look at page 180 through 181, and there are examples of some patterns on there. Now the types of ways that you're going to do your layouts on your projects, the main type is called a parallel line development. So the picture over here is just trying to get you to see and recognize what parallel lines are. Parallel lines are lines that are equal distance apart and will never intersect. So you've got, this is one of the basic classifications of sheet metal pattern development. The next one is something called radial line development. On radial line development, if you look up here in this picture, this is going to be a cone that somebody's making. So all of these lines stem from this same point. So right where my pointer is, every line on here comes from this point. In sheet metal work, you want to make sure that you are watching the edges of the metal. The metal is going to be pretty sharp on the edge, so what we do is we put this thing called a hem. So if you look over here, all we have done on this image here is that you take and fold the piece of metal all the way over until it touches back on the opposite side. So this is typically about 1/4 of an inch. This will again make this edge smooth, but it also is going to strengthen that. The reason it will strengthen that is because if you just look, it's double the thickness of the metal now. So if you would go to try to flex this piece of metal, you would notice that this edge is a lot more rigid. When you have to join metal together, pieces of metal sheets together, this should say sheet, covered by my graphic here. So seams are the joining of two pieces of sheet metal by edges. This is just an example of one type of seam. There are a lot of different types of seams that we can work with, but as you see, this would be one piece of metal, and it kind of comes up and it loops around and hooks here. And then this would be the other piece of metal that you're locking together, so it comes down, around, and locks through here. So a lot of the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning technicians, they will put ductwork together using seams. So you're not going to always have a piece of metal that's big enough, so you will have to seam those together. Tin snips, aviation snips are going to kind of be used interchangeably. So this set of snips up here is what we call a compound levered pair of snips. So you have a point here and a point here that you're going to see the snips open up and close. Now these two pivot points right here, because there's two of them, it makes it compound levered. It increases the mechanical advantage, which makes it seem a lot easier to cut the metal. So the metal is going to come in here. It's going to make it seem a lot easier to cut the metal with these than just a regular pair of tin snips. If you want to make a nice long straight cut in a piece of sheet metal, you're going to use something called a squaring shear. So on the squaring shear, what you have is you're going to put your sheet metal on the table here. You would set your measurement on the back here and here. That's going to tell you how much metal is being cut on the back side. And there's also going to be a ruler here and here, and it's going to tell you how much material is on this side of your blade. Then what you would do after you have your measurement set and your piece of metal on here, this thing here, it's called a foot stomp. And it's exactly what it sounds like. You're just going to take your foot and you're going to stomp down on that like that, and it's going to cause this whole mechanism to go down, which is going to cause the blade to cut your piece of metal, and your piece of metal is going to drop off the back. When you're talking about sheet metal, you're going to hear a lot about something called a gauge. Gauge can be two things. It can be this thing over here. This is a part, a tool used for checking metal parts thickness. So if you look close, the difference is this gap gets smaller as it goes around. And if you look really, really close, you see different numbers on here. So the different numbers are going to be representing what the gauge of the metal is. Gauge is a specification of metal thickness. So how thick the metal is the gauge. Finish up this lesson, the essential questions. Name some of the industries that use sheet metal fabrication. In class, we talked a lot about the automotive industry, aviation, motorcycle, HVAC, and heating and cooling. And then where have you seen sheet metal used in your life? Are there any other substances that could have been used instead? Why or why not? That's going to do it for lesson 4. If you need to rewind this video or stop it, obviously at any point in time, and review anything, make sure you do that. If you have any questions, you can always make sure you stop by to see me.